Hello and welcome to the very first episode of Id Shooter Marathon. Now, we're going to do something interesting here. Instead of going straight into id Software's first shooter, Wolfenstein 3D, I thought it would be interesting to take a look at some games that led to the creation of Wolfenstein 3D. Now, at this time, id Software was mostly known for creating the 2D action adventure games Commander Keen. But unfortunately for them, because they were a small company and they did not have a lot of resources at their disposal, they borrowed, quote unquote, borrowed computers from their previous company that they worked at, Softdisk. Now, unfortunately, Softdisk found out that they were, taking computers from the office on weekends and bringing it early in the morning on Monday mornings, and they were making money off these games that they were making on their PCs, on Softdisk's computers. So Softdisk decided that, okay, well, instead of us suing you for using our equipment and us not seeing any of the Commander Keen profits, how about you just make a whole bunch of games for us? And so id Software decided, as long as we can avoid a lawsuit, that'd be great. So they developed a whole bunch of games. Basically, they dished them out quite fast, something like one game every 2 months. But this was a good opportunity for the creators at id Software to test some technology and release them as Softdisk games, as opposed to tarnishing the id Software brand if they were to release a dud, so to speak. Now, this is the very first 3D game that they ever produced. This was programmed, this engine that this game is using was programmed by John Carmack. And Carmack had this idea of creating a 3D engine, or at least a engine or, graphics that look kind of 3D, and try to make it run nice and fast and smooth on the average computer. Yes, they did have to cut corners. For instance, there are no textures. It's just plain blank, at this point, just a bunch of green walls and yellow walls. But it was the snowball that would become sort of the avalanche. And they, the guys at id Software learned a lot from the stuff that they would learn during development of this game. Now, going back to this game, this is Hovertank 3D. I don't know if you've been paying attention to what's going on the screen, but basically you are in a hover tank and you are rescuing civilians that are being attacked by these sort of mutant, like alien creature things. I did read the story. Apparently it's supposed to take place in a nuclear age of some kind, like nuclear explosions are going on and stuff like that, even though what's happening on the screen doesn't have anything to do with that. But whatever. At least it's a concept. I have to admit that even though they put a lot of effort into the technology in this game, you can tell that they probably did not put too much effort in all the other bits. Like, the audio was very basic. Like, yay! I wouldn't be surprised if that's John Romero. He's quite the character at id Software. John Romero, although he was one of the programmers on this, one out of two programmers on this game, he's mostly known for good game design. Anyways, but this game, I'll admit, I got kind of bored in this game very quickly. This is it. What you see here is the entire game. Now, granted, there might be more to it, but I don't know. I always get very bored before I can get very far in this game. Now, you're probably wondering what those... Yeah, okay, that's a guy just died. Yeah. But anyways, that sound of the crashing sound, that's when your hover tank, touches a wall. And unfortunately, 2 guys died. But the funny thing about this game is that this Hovertank 3D has the same problem that another hover game has, and that is the little map in the bottom of the screen is a lot more useful than the visuals that you see in the top half of the screen, because the top half of the screen has a very narrow field of vision. It looks like it's something ridiculously narrow, like 50 degrees, or I'm not too sure. For those that don't know what I mean by narrow field of vision, well, imagine taking a pair of binoculars and walking around whilst wearing them. It's going to be difficult to see where you're going because everything seems so close to you and so claustrophobic. That's sort of the problem we have with this game. So at this point, I actually kind of got tired of playing this game, so I decided, well, let's quit the game. But instead of just pressing escape and quitting the game, I decided, you know what? Let's self-destruct and end this game with a big bang. So I'm just going to press the self-destruct button. Yeah. I don't know why that button is there. It's actually the F11 button, or the function 11 button on the keyboard. I don't know why they included it, but I guess it's kind of cool. I guess it's if you get really tired of the game. Next up is Catacomb 3D. This came out a couple of months after Hovertank 3D, and by the way, Hovertank 3D came out in April, I think, of 1991. This one came out around November 1991. Now, this is a good example of id Software, you know, being a small company, trying to recycle as many resources as they can. And if any of you are familiar with the Commander Keen games, will notice that the menu of this game is exactly the same, you know, like the same layout. It has basically the same sound effects. There's even a Pong sort of clone mini game that you can play just like in Commander Keen Episode 4. Originally, I thought that all of these resources were stolen from Commander Keen 4, but it turns out that this game came out maybe a month before Commander Keen 4. But maybe they were working on Commander Keen before they worked on this game. So I'm not sure which game stole what, but this game is using a music track that repeats forever. It's so annoying. This music, I actually at one point turned it off. Not for this playthrough though, but yeah, this track is in Commander Keen, but unlike in Commander Keen when there's lots of stages that have different music, this is it. This is the only music you're gonna hear. I don't know if it ever changes as the game progresses, because again, like with Hovertank 3D, you kind of get bored of the same thing. This is pretty much everything you see here is pretty much it. Granted, there are a few new monsters and some upgrades that you can get. Like for instance, if you look at the bottom of the screen, you have a couple of things such as bolts, nukes, and healing potions. Now, admittedly, I wondered about this, even right up to the point where I recorded this. I thought to myself, okay, how do I use these power-ups? So maybe the controls will tell me. Now, you'll see later on in this playthrough, I'll actually go to the menu to try and find out what the keys are. But in fact, it's going to happen right here. Here I am pressing a whole bunch of buttons, and it just brings up a whole bunch of other things. So I decided to go to the menu, movement, and buttons, and guess what? There's just a fire button and a strafe button, and that's it. So here I am just so confused. I'm like, well, clearly the bolt and the nukes and the heals are there for a reason. So I decided I'm just going to have to do the classic, you know, DOS way of discovering keys, and that is just press every button on the keyboard until something happens. And but at this point, I'm actually, it doesn't look like I'm pressing a whole bunch of buttons, but I actually am. Fortunately, they don't do anything weird like, you know, cause the game to exit or anything like that. But yeah, these guys are really getting old. The same dudes forever. This, you know, this, obviously you play as a wizard, and you have, your main weapon has two functions, kind of like Mega Man with his Mega Buster. You can rapidly fire the weapon, or you can hold down the button to charge up your weapon and fire it, and it's the same. But except, unlike in Mega Man where it was really useful, this isn't very useful. I would actually charge up the thing to max power. Okay, there we go. I just discovered the bolt, which is the letter B. Anyways, I would try to charge up this weapon or your magic, and it wouldn't be very effective. So So I guess the more effective weapons would be the ones that have a limit, an ammo count, like the bolts and the nukes. I haven't tried the nukes yet because I figured, oh, it must be a really big, powerful weapon. Anyways, but yeah, the bolt is mapped to the B button, the nuke is mapped to the N button, and the H is for healing. So that makes sense because all three of those buttons are right next to each other, and it's very intuitive. The only problem is that why didn't they just list it in the menu? You know? So you just have to sort of figure it out. I don't know. Maybe the game came with a manual, and you could, whatever. Anyways, this is kind of cool. Where some walls will be destroyed if you fire them. Now, I don't know if you guys noticed, I did use the nuke. It's sort of like exactly the same as your standard weapon, except it fires in 8 different directions. Not as effective as I hoped it would be. But the bolt is very effective. It killed those 2 big monsters very quickly. Unfortunately, again, I'm out of the bolts, so very limiting. You mostly, like 99% of the time, you're going to use your standard attack, and that can get old really quickly. Another thing I don't like about this game is how when you touch the walls, you get stuck. You have to make sure you're not touching the walls if you want to get through these corridors quite easily. And one thing I do like about this version of this engine, this is a modified, or rather improved version of the Hovertank 3D engine, and of course Wolfenstein 3D would be an improved version of the Catacomb 3D engine. So it's basically the Wolfenstein 3D 0.7 or something like that. But as you can see, I'm trying to find secrets because I cannot find any keys in this place. I'm just wandering around, just trying to figure out where do I go next. Now I know I can get past this level, I've done it before, but I just can't remember because, let's face it, these levels look kind of generic, so I can't remember any landmarks because there is none. Anyways, so I got bored at this point and I was like, let's play some Pong, which is called Skull and Bones. Pretty basic stuff, but I'm not exactly sure why Carmack well, I don't know, maybe Romero programmed this in, but I'm not exactly sure why this was included. But anyways, I was demonstrating back there that you can literally keep the ball in the same position and just sit there forever, which is not a whole lot of fun. So I decided to try and actually knock it past the opponent. And it's actually really easy. What can I say? I don't know, like, I find this to be more interesting than Catacomb 3D. Okay, maybe that's an exaggeration. I think Catacomb 3D is still more fun than this game, but because I'm enjoying this game a lot more, just shows how repetitive Catacomb 3D can get. And even though Wolfenstein 3D, the next game after this, and the first game to be released under the id Software banner, would be more is more interesting than Catacomb 3D and Hovertank 3D, but it's still not quite as interesting as most other games. I do tend to get bored of these games very quickly. But I do think it is interesting to see how these 3D engines started, how Wolfenstein 3D started, how, Carmack was able to test the technology at the expense of a different software company. But well, maybe that wasn't the intention, but because he was passionate about creating advanced 3D engines, and these were pretty advanced for their time. I really appreciate the Catacomb 3D engine for introducing textures on walls, unlike Hovertank 3D, which is really boring to look at. And there's so many possibilities that can be done with these engines. But I think they only really reached that potential with Wolfenstein 3D, which we will see in the very next part. So, by the way, yes, this part is part 0 because this is pre-id Software shooters. Next part will be part 1, and we will take a look at Wolfenstein 3D.